So I told my parents on Monday, I said, hey, they're going to allow coaches to come and visit. And so Coach Harbaugh flew out there that next week after the Big Ten championship in 2021. So they just played Iowa and beat Iowa, and we're heading to the college football playoff. And met with him, talked to him, and after 45 minutes, I said, yeah, I want to go and play at Michigan. Committed to him, shook his hand, and just like that, we were back on the streets proselyting.
Hi, my name's Mike Lacey, and I was standing below this man. He was towering over me, Andrew Gentry, here from Michigan, actually from Littleton via Michigan, and a mission, and now a little cast on his leg. Andrew, it's good to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I brought up the cast on the leg. I should have brought that up later, but how are you doing physically?
Doing really well. Yeah, we're on track, and if not on track, ahead of schedule right now to get back into plan. And so things are going really well. One of the big reasons I picked BYU is because they've got a great physical therapy team here.
Cool.
And so literally just came from physical therapy this morning. And so every morning been getting that physical therapy in and stacking days and trying to get better. But the foot's feeling good. Hopefully the boot comes off in the next couple of days. And
good.
From there, we start walking, then running, and then we're back into full go, hopefully in the next
Sweet.
couple months here. So,
well, I mean, we'll come back to that in a moment because it'll be fun to hear about your transitioning from national championship team last year to somewhat of a disappointing season this year, although you beat the Ohio State.
Oh, we don't call them the Ohio State. They wish that they could call themselves that, but
I love this.
But no, yes, as long as we beat those guys, it was a successful season.
And wow, you beat Alabama.
Beat Bama as well.
So fantastic, but it had to be really, really hard being on the sideline.
It was tough, yeah. And last year was a tough year for me personally, just because I was fighting through injuries almost the entire year. I had a little bit of an issue going on at the beginning of the year that I was fighting through, not enough to keep me out of games, but to the point where I wasn't, playing at my best level and wasn't at an ability to start yet, and got that taken care of about midway through the season once they kind of diagnosed it and figured out what was going on. And then once I got that taken care of and was healthy, was able to then break into the starting role. And then second game into that starting role, get injured with the Lisfranc injury in the second quarter of the Michigan State game, which was unfortunate. But, God's got a bigger plan, and it all worked out for a reason. So I'm grateful I'm here. And obviously it was a frustrating year, not how I planned it to go, but at the same time, just grateful it all played out the way it did.
That Lisfranc injury is so painful. I mean, we had Chad Lewis on.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught the game-winning pass in the NFC Championship game. And when he came down, as a Philadelphia Eagle, he landed as an injured guy who would not be able to play in the Super Bowl because of a Lisfranc.
Yep.
So tell us about that injury and what the docs are telling you the schedule is. Or is it different for everybody? Because Taysom Hill came back and he's still an amazing guy that runs all over the place.
Yeah. No, so it's a good thing, honestly, the way that it happened. Obviously not a good thing that it happened, but the way the doctor said is that it's a best worst case scenario is how they talked about it. So obviously Lisfranc isn't a good injury, right? You're going to be out for a decent amount of time. It requires surgery, and so I had surgery last year to get that repaired. But the way they looked at it, the way it happened, the way it tore, is they said I should have no lasting effects. So once I'm cleared and healthy and back and ready to go, that it should be that way, and I won't have any hesitations. I won't be able to, I won't be limited on anything that I need to be doing. So they said I should make a full recovery, that I should be back in 100%, which is grateful for me, or something that I'm grateful for. And so hoping that it just continues to progress that way.
It's funny. I'm an old man now, so I can't imagine playing the game that I used to. Well, thank you. I'll take that as a nice compliment, but I couldn't play football now. I look at you guys down on that field playing that fun, unbelievable game. but thinking about my attitude of I'm going to run into you and I don't care how big you are. I'm just going to give it my all. And,
Yeah.
and it didn't hurt. It was almost like, to me back then, I don't know. Some people know that sweet feeling of hitting the golf ball right in the sweet spot, or a baseball, right in the zone. And that's what football felt like back then. And now, if I tried to run into you, I'd break every bone in my body.
Well,
and I'd lay it
short. We could do it, and we could see. Just kidding.
But Andrew, I'm proud of you and coming through this Lisfranc injury. And I understand from a little bit of what you said that without that injury, you may have stayed at Michigan.
Yeah, most likely would have stayed at Michigan. It was, like I mentioned, right, it was a little bit of a frustrating year at first, trying to fight through an injury at the beginning of the year. And then once I got healthy from that, breaking into that starting role, and then to have that happen, I was starting and feeling really good and playing really good football at that point too, that I felt like, and was grading out really well. And so was planning on just, sticking it out, and was going to be the projected starter coming into this season if I continued to play the way I was. And then just unfortunate timing with the way that it happened. And then when you're injured and, you're after you get out of surgery and you're laying on your couch all day because you don't have anything else to do, and you're on pain meds, just kind of out of everything, and you start thinking, right? And for me, it was thinking and a lot of prayer, and just felt very strongly that I was being led to go somewhere else, right? And
Coach Harbaugh had left.
Coach Harbaugh had left too, and that was a big part of my decision to leave Michigan. I love Coach Harbaugh.
Sure.
Still love Coach Harbaugh, and I love what he's doing with the Chargers. I mean, you see what that guy's done everywhere that he's been. I mean, you look at him when he got to the 49ers and turned that team around. Even before that, you look at Stanford, what he did there. And then at Michigan, turned that program around, got to the national championship.
He's a proven coach.
Proven, for sure.
And my heavens, I would never say anything negative about Michigan because they're one of the great traditions of this country. That must have been fun.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Playing in Michigan under Coach Harbaugh. Share some of your feelings about that great opportunity you had.
Yeah, I mean, I love my...
Even though as a Cougar fan, I was not angry, but I was saying, oh, dang, how'd we miss this guy? But go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell me how great Michigan is, because it is. It's a cool place.
It is, yeah. I mean, their slogan is that it's the greatest university in the world, right? And now I feel like there's two greatest universities in the world, right? You got BYU and Michigan. But I loved it. I loved my first 3 years there, especially those first two were unbelievable. You talk about going to the college football playoff my freshman year. Had an unfortunate game against TCU that I know everybody wishes we could have had back that year.
I remember that game.
Yeah, a big upset that TCU pulled.
It was a big upset.
And, I mean, any win in the playoff isn't necessarily an upset, right? Because anybody can beat anyone. But I think we definitely were the better team that year and played a down game. But that motivated us a lot into last season, that 2023 season, and just had so much fun last year. I mean, that was awesome when you just go out there and every game you just feel like you can beat anyone. And we did beat everyone, right? And it was such a fun experience. And just listening to Coach Harbaugh's leadership too, he taught me so many good things about the game of football, but even just life in general. Coach Harbaugh, man, that guy is the guy that you see in interviews that everybody kind of makes fun of a little bit of being quirky and having his own little things. And he definitely has his quirks, but he's the same guy every day. He's
some consistent. Of the best coaches, are so intense.
Yep.
And that's what makes great coaches. I mean, you could compare and contrast the different personalities just at BYU in the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And I know you have some BYU connections from home, from Colorado, and we can go into that. But yeah, I mean, I look past those quirky things because seriously, some of the best people in every profession have quirks.
And that makes you who you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you can own who you are, I think that's when you're at your best level.
Good
and that's
point.
What Coach Harbaugh always did is he owned who he was. He never tried to pretend to be somebody else.
And he didn't have to apologize.
And he didn't have to, right? And that's what made him so good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And it just brings to me a memory that I have because I'm an avid reader. I love the Wall Street Journal, but I also love reading about sports and reading about, our Cougars. Being alumni from BYU, I love all that goes on at BYU. It's not perfect, but there's so much good that comes from the school and the athletic programs. And so here I read about this Andrew Gentry, and I may call you Austin during this visit. I was a bishop in a ward in Farmington, New Mexico, where we had a a fantastic young man, autistic young man named Austin Gentry. And we always talked about Austin because he was so high performing in just his life.
Yeah.
And so when I hear the name Gentry, I want to put an Austin in front of it. So if I do that, please forgive.
Yeah, no worries.
But Andrew, as a Cougar fan, I remember when I think you signed straight out of high school with Colorado, right?
I signed with Virginia.
Virginia.
University of
Okay. Virginia. Tell us about Bronco.
Yeah, so Bronco Mendenhall, right?
Right.
So in my high school time, I was blessed that I got recruited by a number of different schools. Most schools in the country had reached out.
Including our Cougs.
Including the Cougs, no doubt.
I know.
No doubt. My brother was actually playing at BYU while I was getting recruited in high school. So he was on the offensive line here at BYU while I was getting recruited. And BYU was always there recruiting me in high school and whatnot. At the time, BYU was obviously independent. And so coming out of high school, I really wanted to go to a program that, one, respected me and my decision to serve a mission. So I knew I was going to serve a mission going out of high school and want to do that right away. And so it's interesting to hear some of these coaches' perspectives when you tell them, hey, like, you're talking to Alabama. I remember talking to Nick Saban and telling Nick Saban, like, I'm going to serve a mission. I'm not going to be there at school for 2 years. And for him, that was kind of a weird concept to understand, right?
Right.
Well, you're one of the top recruits in the country. Why are you going to go serve a mission when we think you could come play really soon at Alabama?
Sure. Yeah.
And having to explain that to him. And so for me, that was really important that, okay, I need to find a school that not is only okay with me serving a mission, but understands that when I come back, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to develop back into playing shape.
And it does.
Things. And it really does, right? And so when I was making that decision, Virginia was in a really good spot at that point.
Bronco had turned them around quite a while.
He really had.
Go ahead. Championship?
Yes, they went to the ACC championship
That's
that
right.
year against Clemson. Then went to the Orange Bowl that year and played a tough Florida team. I think they lost, but we're really looking in a good spot. And so I was like, I really want to be a part of that program. And Bronco, obviously being at BYU for all those years, understood how to coach return missionaries. Coach Garrett Tujay, whose son now plays at BYU, he was the offensive line coach at that time. And I love Coach Tujay, still have a great relationship with Coach Tujay, who's now at NC State. And so it all kind of fit that I was like, yeah, this looks like a really good opportunity for me to, one, then come back and play early from my mission, and two, just be part of a good program. And so I ended up signing there and then serving my mission. And that was the plan until December of 2021, until Bronco Mendenhall stepped down. And that's when that whole ordeal went down with Jim Harbaugh and whatnot.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm glad you shared this with us. That's so good to know that timeline. So you were probably planning on going to Virginia until Coach Mendenhall,
Yep.
Chose to retire for a moment.
Yep.
Or for a couple of years. And what a proven record he's had. But back on your deal, it kind of opened you up. So do you make some kind of an announcement? Hey, I'm not going to go to Virginia? Or how did Coach Harbaugh? First question.
Yeah.
When you're on a mission, is it almost like you're in the transfer portal because you haven't gone to an Alabama or a Virginia yet?
Yeah, so not necessarily, right? So I had signed with Virginia. My letter of intent was to Virginia. And so other schools couldn't really contact me for that first year.
For the first
year, right?
You're signed. Tampering.
Or else it would be tampering, right? And then, to my understanding, I don't know the rule exactly, but after a year is kind of when that national letter of intent becomes void if you don't show up in campus for a year.
Got it.
And so at that point, though, I didn't hear from anyone just because the pandemic was going on, and people kind of forget about you too when you're on your mission a little bit.
Oh, I can bear testimony to that.
Right.
Even though you're one of the top recruits, and BYU has this, it used to be they'd say, "Oh, the 3-year redshirt program."
Right. Exactly.
But then the Oregons and the USCs said, "Hey, wait, we can deal with that."
Exactly. Yeah. And so then when Bronco Mendenhall stepped down, being a missionary, especially being in Orem, Utah at the time, I was like, I don't want to make this a big deal. If anything, I want to keep it quiet. I want to keep it personal. I don't want a lot of attention. I don't want a lot of media around this because I'm a missionary first, and I'm going to focus on being a missionary. But I knew at that moment, I was like, I don't want to go to Virginia anymore.
Got it.
I knew that it was time to go somewhere else.
Had you been to Charlottesville?
Yeah, I'd been to Charlottesville multiple times.
Okay.
And again,
it's a beautiful college town.
Oh, gorgeous. Yeah, Virginia's awesome, and it's a great school as well. And that was a big part of my decision process as well, was finding a really good academic school as well. And so at that time, I remember I called my parents on a P-Day. Or actually, I'll back up a little bit. So I I think he stepped down on like a Wednesday or Thursday. And obviously I couldn't email or talk to anyone, but my parents could send me emails. I just couldn't respond. So they sent me an email.
That's a mission rule, right?
Or mission rule. Yeah, exactly.
No. And interestingly, my wife and I were serving a mission in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And due to issues, beyond the conversation here, we were reassigned.
Yeah.
And our reassignment brought us to the Orem, Utah mission, which you had already finished. But your history of the visit you had.
Yep.
So I love you being able to share this because I remember it wasn't that long ago, even though when you get old, your short-term memory kind of gets a little weak. I can still remember these days. So I'm glad you're sharing this with us. So where were you then? You wanted to keep it quiet. You couldn't write because it was mission rule. You didn't want to go out and make yourself available to all these colleges because you're going to have everyone in the world beating your door down.
Exactly, right? And so at that point, I remember my parents emailed me, and they said, we assumed just from talking to you that you probably don't want to go to Virginia. They said, we haven't made anything official yet. We'll wait till we talk to you on Monday. But they said, we have reached out to a couple schools. They said...
Your parents?
My parents had, yeah. Because obviously, when you get recruited, coaches try to build a relationship with your parents as well.
Sure.
And so they had coaches' numbers and different things. So my dad made 2 different calls. He called BYU, and he called Jim Harbaugh. And so Coach Harbaugh, one thing you have to understand about him is he loves just to build personal relationships with people, and he's really good at it.
Sure.
And so he gave my dad his personal phone number, and my dad was like, well, I don't even know if this is still his personal number, but we're going to call and find out. And Coach Harbaugh picked up on the second ring, and my dad's name is Todd, and he's like, Todd, how's it going? Like, just started asking him all these questions. He was prepared, and he's like, how's Andrew doing? Where's he at? What's he doing? And explained that I was on a mission, and then he said, and I don't know if you heard, but the Virginia coach stepped down, and Coach Harbaugh hadn't heard that yet. And he said, well, where's Andrew? We're going to come get him. And my dad said, well, he's a missionary, so hang on just a second.
He's walking the streets of Orem, Utah or whatever.
And he said, well, we want him. And he said, like, we don't care that he's been on a mission. Like, he's our number one priority now that we want to get in Michigan. And so my dad said, all right, like, let me talk to Andrew on Monday, and we'll see where he's at with everything. And so talked to my parents on Monday. And also during this time, so the Evansons, President and Sister Evansons.
Presidents and wonderful, excellent people. But they're from Canada.
So
I didn't know if they were BYU fans or not. I said, no, don't let him visit with Jim Harbaugh. You bring Kalani Sitake. I'm speaking as a BYU fan.
No, exactly. But so it was funny because I went to President Evanson and was serving as the assistant at that time. So I was very close to him and had a lot of interaction with him and kind of explained to him what was going on. And I told him, I said, I just want you to know, like, I'm not going to have coaches come out and visit me. And he said, well, I want you to stop right there. He said, because I think you should have coaches come out and visit you. And he said, you need to prepare to go home from a mission. Like, this is a really important decision. I don't want you to make it blindly. He's like, 2, they should really see what you're doing right now.
Sure.
And how important this is to you and what you've been doing for these last 2 years.
That's sweet.
It was really cool.
I like that.
And so I said, okay. So I told my parents on Monday, I said, hey, they're going to allow coaches to come and visit. And I talked to my parents, and I was like, I felt like after a lot of prayer, I said, I think Michigan is probably the spot for me. And I said, but I want to meet Coach Harbaugh and at least, talk to him face to face first before I make this official. And so Coach Harbaugh flew out there that next week after the Big Ten championship in 2021. So they just played Iowa and beat Iowa, and we're heading to the College Football Playoff. And we met at Tucanos at University Mall, just down in Orem.
That was my next question. I wanted to know what kind of... That's cool. By down in University Mall, Tucanos.
Yep, exactly.
And you had a big old Brazilian...
I had a Brazilian steakhouse right there and met with him, talked to him. And after 45 minutes, I said, yeah, I want to come play at Michigan. Committed to him, shook his hand. And just like that, we were back on the streets proselyting. But it was a really cool experience. So at that time, we were actually in a trio. So it was Elder Gomez and Elder Fernando Gomez and Elder Hiram Johnson.
So how did they feel about sitting here with Jim Harbaugh and Andrew Gentry, this top-notch football player? I mean, that had to be fun for them, just being there in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think they loved it. It was fun because they were both football fans. And so when I was kind of explaining...
Was Coach Harbaugh fine with that? No problem?
Oh, he was awesome.
Yeah.
That's the thing about Coach Harbaugh that's cool, too, is he's very public about his faith. And I don't know, I'm sure people have seen, but... he's been very public about his stance on abortion and how that relates to his faith. He's been very public about just his faith in general, right? Cool. And he was very big on that at Michigan with us. We had his personal assistant was our team pastor at Michigan.
Wow.
And so that just shows how involved he was with his religious side and encouraged us to do that as well. And so on my mission, he was so supportive of that and what we were doing. And it was just, he said, finish out. I remember the last thing he told me, he said, go serve, hard for this last 6 months.
It's fourth quarter.
Yeah. He said, fourth quarter. He said, go do your best here. And then, then you can
come back,
play for us and do your best for us. And like I said, loved my time there with him. And it was a crazy story of how I got there. It's funny how it all shaped up to get there, but it was a really cool experience, and definitely felt guided by the Lord to be there, and knew I had to be there for those last couple of years. And then I'm excited now to take that next step here to BYU.
And I tell you what, I'm excited for you to take that next step. Of course, the next step hopefully is without that boot.
Right. Exactly.
And getting back in shape. Well, not that you're out of shape. I'm just saying getting that foot and ankle so that you don't have to favor it. You don't have to fear it. Have you played with injury before?
I have. Yeah. So like I mentioned last year, right, was kind of fighting through an injury at the beginning of the year that we got under control and healthy. And so, I've already gone through that process once. And I remember last year being frustrated trying to, because they couldn't really figure out exactly what was going on. I just wasn't feeling 100%. And then once they did.
When you say last year, are you talking about this past season?
Yeah, this past season. So
because the prior season, the national championship,
mm-hmm.
I mean, you always, as a football player, you always have some injuries, but was that less injury prone?
Yeah, I wasn't injury prone. I also wasn't playing as much that year. We had 6 offensive linemen go to the NFL that year.
Oh, wow.
So we were just really deep. In my first 2 years at Michigan, we had 8 offensive linemen go to the NFL.
Wow.
So we were
That's a big deal.
A very deep offensive.
Were they rotating quite a bit? Were you still getting time?
I got a little bit of time because in that year, because we were so good, we blew out a lot of teams in 2023. And so I was able to get in at the end of games a lot of times and get experience. I played on special teams. So I played in every game in that national championship season. So I got to play in every game, including that national championship, which was fun. And then last year was really that first year of then being able to kind of take a role. But then again, like I mentioned, had to fight through injury at the beginning of the year. Once I got that under control, and then had the second injury. So I think last year, at the beginning of the season, though, it really gave me perspective on how to fight through injury, how to know how to rehab better. Because I'll be honest, I was probably not the smartest about my injury to start the season. I was kind of just under the mentality of, well, I'm just going to play through it. That's what I've done in the past, and I'll just get through it, and probably made it a little worse. And then when I finally started taking care of my body and doing the right things, was able to get it under control and feel so much better and heal quicker. And so it taught me a really good lesson for this now. And so again, I think it's funny how you look at, I say this a lot, but how the Lord is in the details. And I think the timing of teaching me how to do that the right way, and then getting injured. And now it's taught me just the importance of taking care of my body, and then getting healthy with this, and getting in the right state of mind as well mentally for the next season.
Cool. So how much now? I mean, it's just this semester that you've entered with BYU, correct?
Correct.
So how ingrained yet are you?
Yeah.
With Kalani Sitake, with the coaching staff, with the players, it's going to be a new culture,
right?
I mean, it sounds like there'll hopefully be a lot of similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. And there definitely are a lot of similarities. And I would say I've been very, very well. I've been accepted very well at BYU. It's been a great transition so far. The tough part is right now, so you talk about like position coaches and Coach Sitake. Right now, this is kind of their, I don't want to say off time, because as a coach, you never get off time in college football. But this is their recruiting time, and so they're out on the road recruiting.
True.
Taking their weeks off and different things like that, because it's a long season for them. And so I haven't interacted with them as much, obviously, within the recruiting process. They were great, and they've continued to be great. But in terms of players and the strength and conditioning, I'm fully ingrained. I mean, every day I'm in there watching film, going over the playbook with the graduate assistants in the offensive line. So I feel like I've got a really good understanding of the offense already for where I'm at. Obviously, still a lot of things to learn because it's been 1 week. But I feel like I'm at a point right now where if I was thrown into a game, I could figure it out. Which when you get to a level, right, of football, everybody in college football runs the same plays. They just have a different name, right? And so at the same point, it's just like, all right, in my mind, this is what this play was called at Michigan, but here it's this, but it's blocked the same way.
And frequently, but it's interesting how sometimes coaching philosophies change just a little bit, in the details.
The details, exactly.
So yeah, there are going to be those little nuances that Now, are you going to be able to go into spring ball, or you're not sure?
Not 100% sure yet.
Okay.
My guess would be I probably wouldn't be full go in spring ball, especially I think that's more for, maybe my foot might be ready to go, but let's not push it just to get back for spring.
But you can learn, you can be out there, you can do the footwork. And
Yep.
without maybe full contact and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that's probably what it will be, is a lot of just watching guys and, trying to take reps mentally and get going. So as soon as fall camp rolls around, I don't miss a beat.
I was really impressed with BYU's offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
This year, it almost felt like they made not just incremental strides, but higher logarithmic or exponential growth.
Yeah.
In the way they developed as a team, and I assume that's some really good coaching.
Absolutely.
On the offensive line. Is his name Woods?
Yeah, Coach Woods, and he's awesome. That was a big part of my decision as well, was finding a good offensive line coach that was experienced, that had coached guys to the NFL, and that was coaching really good offensive lines. And to see what he did with players here at BYU last year and developing them and helping them take that next step forward in their game was really impressive to me, and something that I said, I think Coach Woods could really help me in my game as well, take that next step forward. And he's been awesome. He's been great.
I bet he is.
That. Yeah, he's a really, really good coach. He knows his stuff.
Cool.
He knows football, and he knows how to help the players. You can tell he cares about the players. And so I just can't wait to get to work with him.
Sweet.
And develop my game further with him.
At my age, I get to call you guys kids.
Yeah, we are.
I'm kidding. Well, and in a lot of ways you are, but man, you are adults. And the players that I've met, basketball and football and others, the kids who are playing nowadays have a maturity that, it's not fair for me to call you kids. But seriously, Coach Woods, I saw some of the players. I wanted to say kids, but I will. From the prior year to this year,
Mm-hmm.
just that I saw exponential improvement.
Yep.
And so I'm excited, man. I'm excited. You can miss spring training. I'll allow that.
Thank you. I appreciate the stamp.
Right. Yeah, way to go, Coach. But I'm so excited for this season too. I mean, the attitudes that I've met, the maturity of these young men. I misunderstood, I think, a little bit the love and learn principle that Coach Sataki's playing with. And I know you're relatively new to the system, but it's probably very persistent or consistent with what Coach Harbaugh had.
Absolutely.
At Michigan too.
Yeah. And I mentioned that to a lot of people, and they've asked me, why BYU? And I've told people, right, in those first 2 years at Michigan, I saw really as good as it gets in college football. I mean, when you win a national championship, it doesn't get much better.
And 8 of your peers, your teammates who are a little older than you, went on to the NFL.
Yep. So, yeah, they all signed contracts in the NFL. We've got a bunch still playing in the NFL right now. And whether they're practice squads or active rosters, I think there's 5 or 6 guys on active rosters and a couple practice squad guys. So, I mean, I was around the best of the best. And then our edge rushers are the best in college football. I think our edge rusher last year, Josiah Stewart, finished 2nd overall in grades in PFF for edge rushers in all of college football. And so every day,
how big of a guy is he? Tell us. D-end, edge rusher.
Yep.
So these defensive ends are brutal. I mean, they're tough.
Big Ten defensive ends are built different. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And they're faster than lightning, right?
Yeah, faster than lightning.
And they're tall, maybe as tall as you.
Yeah. So Josiah was a little bit shorter. He was probably about 6'1", 6 foot.
But he had
6'1",
speed and strength.
But had speed and strength. He weighed about 270 and was fast off the ball. I'll tell you that. So he was, you getting third down against him. And you can just go back and watch any film from Michigan and watch Josiah Stewart on third down, and he'll be wrecking shop out there. But I mean, for me that was good, right? Because iron sharpens iron, and so I've seen really, really good players. And when I was in the portal, I said, well, I'm getting a lot of different offers and a lot of different options from different schools within the Big Ten as well.
The portal meaning while you were on your mission and Coach Bronco Mendenhall had left. And
no,
so
sorry, that's just this past.
Just
a couple weeks ago. Yeah, being in the portal, right?
Okay.
And so when I was in the portal, I really wanted to find a spot that I wasn't going to take a step down, right? Because I still wanted to be competing at a high level. And BYU has shown that they're at that higher level now.
Yeah.
The word I've used with a lot of people in almost any interview I've done since I committed to BYU is urgency. And back, 5 years ago when I was committing out of high school, or even 3 years ago when Bronco Mendenhall left and I was making that decision to go to a different school as well, I just didn't sense that urgency as much at BYU as some of the other schools, right? This is nothing against any.
I understand what you're saying. I felt the same thing, and I'm a close fan. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah,
I mean, feel that urgency.
Yeah, not being in the Big 12, just not being in any Power 4 conference, or I guess it would have been Power 5 at that time. it just felt that there wasn't that next step forward to really push to a national championship, to push to the playoff. And I wanted to go to a spot that was going to compete to win and to do that. And one thing I loved at Michigan is it was just always urgent. Everything we did was urgent. There was deliberate practice. It was deliberate, and everything that we did was to win games. And so then in this last cycle 3 weeks ago, I was trying to find that same thing, and BYU is at that point now where Coach Sataki has done a phenomenal job of putting staff around him and staffing, his staff, like I just mentioned, but then also the correct players. And you go from everything to the strength staff, right? I mean, he's got a brand new strength staff that's completely different than when I was making my decision 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Got on obviously a new offensive line coach. And so he's put those pieces into place to win games and to be urgent. And it's been great because when I was in the process of deciding on a school in the portal, they were talking about, hey, next year, like, we're going to be in the playoff. We're going to be competing for a national championship. It was no more of, we're going to be in the rebuilding process, because I felt when I was getting recruited out of high school, is, you'll be a big part of this rebuilding process, which is great, right? And obviously credit to those players and credit to Coach Sataki for rebuilding it and getting to the point where it did. But now they're at that point where now it's, hey, we're urgent to win. And they're urgent about that. And there's an urgency within that program to go and to win games. And that's what I love.
I knew it was secondary in your last semester. You're at Michigan and you're playing your season. But I'm sure you're also aware, that BYU was having a real good season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a couple hiccups.
Yeah.
And I speak we, as a BYU fan. And that urgency, I sense that the young men that I've spoken with still have that urgency that, hey, but for, here, and all we need to do, I mean, they're taking full accountability. We lost a couple games.
Yep.
And maybe we shouldn't have, and with a little more, work, we can make that next step. It's fun that I haven't seen one of them sit back and say, we were 11-2.
Yeah.
We're in the top 25.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're not. They're hungry.
And that's one of the best things, right? I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I go back to the 2022 season at Michigan, and we mentioned that TCU loss, right?
Oh.
We were 13-1 that year.
Amen,
We were,
man.
Honestly, in my opinion, we were the second best team in college football that year. Georgia was really good, and they won that national championship, right? We finished the season ranked third.
And I know you wanted to be in there against Georgia.
Oh, yeah, and I think we would have probably played a much better game than what ended up happening. No offense to TCU, but
right.
I think we would have competed much better with Georgia, just seeing our roster and how we matched up against them. But we lost that game against TCU, right? We took responsibility for that. There was no excuse for it except, we threw 2 pick sixes and turned the ball over twice inside the 5-yard line. And so for us, though, that year was a huge motivation of, all right, well, what are we going to do so we're not 13-1? 13-1 was really good, right? We went undefeated, in the regular season, won the Big Ten championship, beat Ohio State, a really good Ohio State team.
Deal. Oh, man.
Oh, it was huge, right? And so we were like feeling really, really good. And we could have sat back and said, that was a really good year. But we had that urgency of, no, that feeling was horrible. Losing to TCU and you should have beat them, being so close to a national championship. And I sense that same thing here, right? That BYU isn't content with going 11-2.
No.
That they want to go and win those 2 games, get to the playoff, and then be great.
And you can feel that.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you're on this train to help carry us forward. Now, there's so many things that you've brought up that we could go on so many different tangents. But when a guy like I was a linebacker and a fullback and a tight end, I played in positions where you can get stats.
Yep.
And unless you're going into coaching type stats, when you look up a defense, and that was really interesting because we visited this week with Keanu Tanavasa.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic. I'm sure you guys will run into each other at some time in the near future.
Player. I'm glad we got him here.
Oh, man. He blows offensive lines up. Mm-hmm. He's a strong young man. But, one of his personalities just, he's happy. He's a good man. So anyway, it was interesting, his perspective, because in sports, here you are in a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highest paid positions in the NFL is what? Your left tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are you right or left tackle?
I could play either. I played right at Michigan. Probably a little more comfortable on the right, but I'll play wherever I can get on the field. And wherever.
But both of those tackles are critical because of what you said.
Yep.
Those edge rushers.
Yeah.
and teams are trying to protect their quarterbacks.
Those edge rushers are built different nowadays. So like we were talking about, those are, I mean, if I had to pick, offensive linemen are great athletes, but a best athlete on the field, an edge rusher is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
They're
No, I mean, they are built different, but you're there particularly to keep that guy away or to block him out on a running play. And so you're big, you're strong, and you have to keep really good feet.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
This is gonna sound like a humble brag, and it is.
Well, that's good.
Andy Reid was a teammate, right?
Okay.
And so we had him on the podcast months ago, and right before they were going into their fall practices, and I was teasing him about the prior Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And Travis Kelce was angry about not being in the game. And so he kind of bumped against Coach Reid,
Yeah.
And you saw it on TV. I mean, Andy almost lost his balance.
Yeah.
So I teased him. I said, Andy, what would your offensive coach have told you? You lost your balance on that. You didn't keep your feet. Now, Lacey, he's a tight end. I said, by a receiver, by a receiver. He almost knocked you over. Well, it's a 265-pound receiver, and he caught me off guard. And I love Andy Reid. I mean,
he's
what
awesome.
A good man. And
he's got a great family, too. His son-in-law, actually, so Devin Woodhouse, was one of our strength coaches at Michigan.
Really?
Yeah, so got a great family as well.
I love Andy. I mean, he's a guy that, just like portrayed on the commercials and everything.
Yep.
I mean, he's just, are you going to eat all those nuggets? He's your friend.
That's cool.
And at his role, he has to be careful. He can't return too many calls from Mike Lacey. He's a busy man, but it's fun. Offensive linemen don't get the not the credit. They get the credibility. They don't get the limelight like other positions get.
Right.
And yet, like Keanu Tanuvasa, I'm there to take those blockers off the linebackers, and they can, make the tackles or the sacks.
Yeah.
And you, same thing.
Yep.
You're protecting those running backs and those quarterbacks and giving time to the team to get the pass downfield or, to get that running back a hole. And yet nobody notices because there's not a stat.
Yeah.
How is that? Tell us what it's like, because here you are in a role that's critical, and the NFL pays these guys a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the NIL money is pretty good in colleges now too for offensive linemen. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's something that I've grown up with, right? So I mentioned to you earlier, but my grandpa played football at BYU. He was an offensive lineman.
Was he?
He was, yeah. And you
said in the 1950s.
In the 1950s, so a long time ago. But he was a really good offensive lineman. He was an all-conference lineman here at BYU. Obviously, a very different game back then. He told me that he was the biggest offensive lineman in the conference, and he weighed 225 pounds.
Oh, wow.
It's a very different game now than it was then. But needless to say, he always would talk to me about being an offensive lineman, because from the time I've been a kid, I was always bigger than everyone else. And so when I started playing football in fourth grade, was immediately put on the offensive line. When you're a fourth grader,
in Pop Warner, they put the X on your helmet.
Yeah, exactly. That you can't even catch a pass or anything like that. And so being a fourth grader, right, when you grow up watching football, you don't ever say, I'm going to be an offensive lineman one day, right? And so you get there and you're like, oh, I kind of want to be a quarterback, even though you're, weigh 100 pounds more than everybody, or whatever it is as a fourth grader. But my grandpa would always tell me, he's like, it's a thinking man's position. And he said, it's a thankless position, but it's the most important position on the field. And so for me, that was the mentality I developed, right? And so the way that I've developed and the way that I've thought about it is, similar to what Keanu Tanuvasa said, right, about how his job is to make the life easier for the linebackers. I want to make sure that my quarterbacks and running backs are the best quarterbacks and running backs in the nation, right?
Yeah.
That my running backs don't have to, have all these yards after contact, that they're not getting hit until at least 4 yards down the field, right? Is great, right? That's what I want to try to do. Or that my quarterback doesn't have a high pressure rating, right? That, obviously Jake Retzlaff has shown that he can get out of the pocket and can move, but, let's let him stay in the pocket, right? Let's let him make passes downfield.
Yeah, protect it.
And so for me, right, as an offensive lineman, so maybe I don't get the recognition right away, but when I see a running back doing great and when I see a quarterback playing really well, then in turn that makes me really happy, because it's like, well, that's an arm of my work that I've put in. That's an extension of the work that I've put in. And So that's what makes me happy, is seeing my teammates be successful. And so that's what I want to hear. Right? I want the running backs here to be as good as they possibly can, to have all-star running backs next year, to have an all-star quarterback next year. And if we can have a really good offense, and if they don't say my name one time, then that's a good thing, right? As an offensive lineman, you almost hope they don't say your name, right? And I think there's two positions in football that I always talk about that are really tough to play, and it's defensive back and offensive lineman, for two reasons. One, you're both playing backwards, right? Especially in pass protection. And then when you're passing as a cornerback, so you have to play it backwards. They're reactionary. And then you don't want to have your name called, because if you're getting your name called a lot, that means you're getting beat as a corner or you're getting beat as a lineman a lot. And so the best game that you can have as an offensive lineman is not having your name called unless you make a really good block, or your running backs just go off and have 5 touchdowns. Your quarterback's throwing the ball really well. And then for me, that brings me more joy than having an announcer say my name or do different things like that.
So true. And I'm glad you made that point, because I've never thought of defensive backs. I mean, a shutdown defensive back, and we had some of those this year. Andrew, you said something a minute ago about, you had that injury. Mm-hmm. You were playing alongside guys that were a year or two older than you, and went on 8 of your teammates on the offensive line went into the NFL. Mm-hmm. And so I, as a fan, I say, oh, man, Andrew didn't play that many downs in that national championship game.
Yeah.
But you were playing every day.
Yeah.
Against some of the best defensive linemen in all of college football. So what I wanted to share with you is, I have a son who's playing basketball at Southern Virginia University.
Okay.
And, and he's 6'7".
Yeah.
And Luke hasn't been getting a lot of playing time. He's a sophomore. They have an undefeated team in their conference. Wow. Yeah, they're doing really well.
Yeah.
And they've got a really good team. They've got guys that are balling out, Mm-hmm. And so, we'll talk to him. He's not frustrated. He's putting in his work. He's putting in his time. And I recognize that every day he's playing it against, at his level, top-notch guys.
Yeah.
And that's what you've been doing for the last 3 years.
Yep.
I mean, except for your mission was before that, but the last, 2 or 3 years at Michigan. So, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to share with us about that defensive end. I assume because you've been going against these guys and more live than anything, you're not going to have any problem at all coming in once you've overcome your injury.
I sure hope so. Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, we would always say at Michigan that the practices in the trenches were always harder than the games. Almost always, without fail.
Really?
But if you look at Michigan's defensive line the last couple of years, so my freshman year, Mozzie Smith was one of our defensive tackles, was drafted first round by the Dallas Cowboys. Then you have Mason Graham, who was a finalist for the Outland Trophy this year, will be the first defensive tackle taken in the draft this year. Kenneth Grant was also on our defensive line. He'll be a first-round draft pick this year as well. Mike Morris was drafted 2 years ago, plays for the Seahawks now, was on our defensive line. Like I mentioned, Josiah Stewart, one of our edge rushers, he'll be a top 3-round guy this year.
Wow.
Derek Moore next year will be a top 3-round guy. I think TJ Guy, another one of our edge rushers, will get drafted in the next couple years as well. So you go through and you just look at the defensive linemen we were playing. Rayshon Benny as well. He'll be another guy who will get drafted. He's on our defensive line. So those are the guys every day that you go up against in practice, right? And those are the guys that you're competing with. And again, I made the statement earlier of iron sharpens iron. But I mean, we were going up against the best defensive lineman in the country, right? And so we never saw a defensive line that was better than our defensive line because there just simply wasn't one in college football last year. And so for me, it really pushed me and obviously lost a lot, like I pushed me to learn how to deal with losing, but then also get to a point where I could start competing and getting better and playing with those guys and hanging with those guys. But it pushes you to be a lot better. And then when you get in games, everything just kind of seemed to slow down a little bit, and it was really nice. Great. Yeah, which was great. So hoping to keep that here, right? Obviously, I got to battle through the injury, and then, I know that nothing's given either, right? There's still great offensive linemen here at BYU that I have to go in and earn their respect and earn my right to play.
Earn your spot.
Exactly. And that's the best way to do it, right? Competition's a great thing.
Now, you have all the potential in the world to likewise go into the NFL draft. And yet I, as a loyal Cougar fan, hope that, oh man, we need you. We need you not only this year, but going forward, the next year, because you have 2 or even 3 years of eligibility left. So I don't care that much about what your near-term prospects are, but you've got a future in the NFL. And is that one of your goals?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely one of my goals, and something that I've worked for ever since I was a little kid, right? Is my goal is to make it to the NFL. And when I was in the transfer portal, every coach asked me, like, well, what are your goals? And I said, my goal is to get to the NFL in the next 2 years and to do everything I can to get prepared to go and not just be in the NFL, but be in the NFL for a long time and compete and be good in the NFL. And so that's absolutely one of my goals. And I know I've still got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things to do, but my mentality's always been, if you're not going to work for that, then, why are you even playing college football, right? You should always be striving to be the best you can be and always be working for that goal to get to the highest level in anything that you do, is my opinion, right? Whether that's in school, the job that you pick, right? I don't think people just go to a job and say, well, I'm fine just working at this level for my entire career, right? You want to go and I want to get a promotion here. I want to get a promotion here until you can get as high as you possibly can. And even if you never, reach that, at least you're going to push yourself wherever you are, right? And so for me, my eyes are set on the NFL. I don't, that's where I'm set, is the NFL, right? First, to win a national championship here at BYU, right? I think that's something that needs to start being said at BYU, and it's said within our players, right? But it's to win a national championship, right? That's why we're here at BYU, is to win, right? You win games. You don't just play to get to the playoff. You play to win the playoff. And so that's the goal next year, is to go win that national championship. And then from there, right, is to get to the NFL, and by any means necessary to do so. And so that's my mentality.
Well, we could stop right there. I mean, come on. I'm ready to run out with the flag again.
There you go.
This is fun. Andrew, you're a man with a lot of deep thought. You've prayerfully and gone through some adversity to get to the decisions that you're making, and life is just full of that stuff. Yeah. So, as we finish up here, think about the young kids who might be in Littleton, Colorado, or Detroit, Michigan, or Los Angeles, California. What would you advise them? Maybe they're not gifted with a 6'8" frame that can, push anybody around in the world. And I'm saying that kindly because that's your job in football. But what counsel would you give to people as they're making their way through life?
Yeah.
What have you learned in your years in football that you'd like to share with people?
Man, there's been a lot that I've learned. But the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned that, and, obviously having to fight through some adversity, especially this last year, is something that Coach Harbaugh would always say. And he would say, don't get bitter, get better. Switch the I to an E. And I love that, because he said, you're going to face adversity. You're going to be upset at times. He said, but when you get bitter, that does nothing for you. He said, so flip the I to an E and get better. Work a little bit harder, watch a little more film in football, do a little bit more. But so for me, right, when I got injured, I'm not going to lie and say that I was always just positive, happy thinking all the time, right? But I've tried really hard throughout this injury, instead of saying, okay, am I going to be bitter that I got hurt, that it was such a fluky thing, that I was just finally getting healthy from another injury, and then that it happened so quickly. And, I could get bitter about it, right? And there's so many different circumstances. Mine's a very minor one compared to how many challenges the kids have out there, or anybody has out there, right? My foot is very, very minor in that. But I think in any situation that you go through in life, if you just try to get better and not bitter, and that's what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about, right? Is getting better continuously, right? And that's what we strive to do in life. And it's going to be really hard sometimes. That's not to say this is easy, but when you strive for that, life becomes a lot better and you get a lot better, right? Just as the saying says. And even if you're upset, even if you're sad, you try to stay happy, and things tend to work out when you strive to get better instead of bitter.
I could put that up on the wall. Don't get bitter, get better.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate. And this is way before your time, but Coach James Herrick coached UCLA to a national championship in the 1990s. He's LDS.
Wow.
And he had so many of those comments like that. Don't get bitter, get better. And obviously Coach Harbaugh has a whole book full of those kind of sayings, right?
He sure does. He had a quote wall. He would put people's quotes up. Whenever he heard a good quote, he'd say, hey, like if he had like an assistant, he'd be like, print that up and put it on my quote wall. Whoa. And so he'd walk in his office and he had a whole whole list of quote walls. And so if you made the quote wall, it's always a good thing.
I love that. Well, it's obvious you have a strong feeling of what life is about, why you're here. I love what you've shared here because that'll be of value to all folks. Any other thoughts you'd like to share with us, Andrew?
No, I think we've really hit on everything. I just appreciate you having me on. Super excited to be a part of Cougar Nation now. Everybody's been great, from the fans to the staff to the media. Everybody's been super helpful. And great,
we are pumped to have you here, brother.
Well, thank you.
And I don't want to jinx anything, and so I'm knocking on wood. But that goal is a fantastic goal. All I can give you counsel with is, as you overcome this injury, and you will.
Yep.
Don't get bitter, get better helps, but that progression that we talk about, it comes in steps,
right?
And so it's very. In fact, I think it adds joy to life when sometimes we have setbacks. There'll be a day when your foot hurts a little bit, and you say, "Oh no,"
you
maybe have doubt. And then tomorrow it's going to be better.
Yep.
And you'll feel better. And so you and your team make those steps, because we as loyal Cougars, as joyous fans, as brothers in the gospel or of this wonderful university, we're rooting for you, brother.
Well,
and
thank
it'll be
you.
fun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, thanks for having me on. Thanks for everything that you guys have done. And like I said, just excited to be a part of Cougar Nation.
All right. Andrew Gentry. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Thanks, man. Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Game. Remember to click here to subscribe and click here to watch our recent videos. Also, please follow us on social media. And remember, go Cougs.